Daily news and analysis. We keep you informed and inspired.
This is World Today.
Chinese President Xi Jinping calls for efforts to further advance the China-Belarus ties to a higher level. As the Communist Party of China celebrates the 105th anniversary of its founding this week, we explore why it can steer China's modernization. And extreme heatwave continues to grip Europe. Hello and welcome to World Today. I'm Do Hongyu in Beijing. To listen to this episode again or to catch up on previous episodes, you can download our podcast by searching World Today. Our first story. Chinese President Xi Jinping has called for efforts to further advance the China-Belarus ties to a higher level to benefit both peoples. He made the remarks while meeting with his Belarusian counterpart, Alexander Lukashenko, in Beijing. President Xi said China and Belarus are true friends pursuing common development and prosperity and reaffirmed their all-weather comprehensive strategic partnership. He hailed recent progress in ties, saying their relations have entered the best period in history. President Lukashenko said he looks forward to strengthening strategic communication with China, expanding areas of cooperation, and advancing bilateral relations to new heights. For more, we're joined by Dr. Zhang Xin, Deputy Director of the Center for Russian Studies at East China Normal University. Thank you very much for joining us, Dr. Zhang. President Lukashenko has visited China more than 15 times. Why does Belarus place such a high priority on its relationship with China?
I think since the 1990s, Belarus, as a newly independent state from Soviet Union, has established a very well-grounded relation with China. It has contributed directly to China's key military and the defense sector, and has continued to develop very close economic tie with China. In the recent years, it's also expanded its collaboration in the communities and education sector. So overall, I think Belarus, the state, and particularly its top leadership, has laid a great interest in learning from Chinese development model, and then also through collaboration with China, help solidify a stable regional political and economic order in what we might call Eurasia today. So I think the Belarus state and the Belarusian leadership see the value, a unique value of such collaboration with China ever since the 1990s. And that's, I think, a direct reason why President Lukashenko personally has visited China for many times.
And Chinese President Xi Jinping said China-Belarus relations have entered the best period in history. So what has driven the growth of bilateral ties in recent years?
Well, I think one is the quickly shifting geopolitical context, particularly in the Eurasian region. We have seen there's a lot of factors driving instability, to the least, or even direct military conflict. In this kind of context, Belarusian state as well as Belarusian leadership again see the value and the necessity to solidify its relation, its collaboration with China, as that kind of collaboration become the foundation of regional stability. So I think that's one major reason for recent upgrading of bilateral tie. Secondly, of course, is through the expansion of the Belt and Road Initiative and other important regional initiatives and the projects, mostly through Chinese leadership and the Chinese state for the past 15, 20 years. Belarusian state as well as leadership also see the value of joining, becoming an active part of those initiatives, in particular the Belt and Road Initiative. And several major projects, including the Greystone Industrial Park, have already seen a very promising concrete economic benefits for business, for companies that are directly involved in the Greystone project. So I think that's another reason that in recent years we see a constant uplifting bilateral relation between Belarus and China.
Now, China and Belarus have emphasized common development and shared prosperity. Where do you see the biggest opportunities for China-Belarus cooperation in the years ahead?
One very obvious general direction is, of course, increasing economic collaboration. I've already mentioned the Greystone Industrial Park, but on top of that, there's great potentials in other sectors, including, for example, agriculture. Belarus is a big agricultural economy, has its own rich experience of running the agricultural economy, and has its unique competitive advantage in this particular sector. Another one is new technologies related to internet and digital technology. Belarus also has a very vibrant service sector related to the internet technology, and technicians in those kinds of sectors also have already started to collaborate with their Chinese counterparts in almost every segment of the internet economy. So I think that leaves a huge potential to further develop. And this is some key example in the economic sphere. And another one is the humanities and education sector. These two countries probably, if we take into consideration the size of the Belarusian economy, size of the Belarusian education sector, the collaboration between the two countries in this sphere is actually proportionally higher even than China's collaboration with Russia. So this is already a very high level of bilateral collaboration. But I think there's even more space for collaboration in these sectors to be further uplifted, to be further expanded.
Now, President Xi also called for closer coordination in implementing the 4 global initiatives proposed by China. How could Belarus work with China to turn these initiatives into concrete projects and especially outcomes?
Let me first say, I think the Belarusian state is among the countries that show greatest interest, and also very direct support for China's 4 global initiatives ever since these initiatives were raised. And then, as you correctly point out, now the two parties, China and Belarus, are working together, try to turn these support for the 4 global initiatives, particularly from the Belarusian side, into concrete progress, concrete projects. I think on top of what I've just described, Belarus also has shown interest and shown the readiness to uplift its collaboration with China in implementing, for example, regional projects related to regional stability and order and stability, and through the platforms such as Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and also Belarus also shows interest in the expanded BRICS platform. So those are platforms or overall directions where we will see Belarus to make further efforts to further implement China's 4 global initiatives in concrete projects, in concrete sphere of performances.
You mentioned platforms, including the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. The 2 leaders of the countries also pledged to strengthen coordination in multilateral mechanisms. What role can China and Belarus play together in promoting multilateralism and addressing global challenges?
One is, as I just briefly mentioned, is to strengthen its collaboration, joint efforts, coordination in existing multilateral platform, multilateral mechanism, including UN, including Shanghai Cooperation Organization, BRICS, and other regional initiatives and platforms that both countries have been involved in, have both played an active role. Those are obvious consensus that the leadership from both countries always emphasized collaboration and coordination in these existing platforms of multilateral collaboration. Another direction, I think in the near future, the 2 countries can also, again, strengthen collaboration and coordination in those upcoming new multilateral mechanisms and platforms that are in formation. Chinese state just a few days ago released an important white paper on China's position in global governance. we will see a sets of enhanced or uplifted efforts from the Chinese side to further inject dynamism and new ideas into the reform of global governance on multiple levels. So in that direction, I think Belarusian state, Belarusian leadership have already shown interest and very likely will work actively along with China to be part of these reformed, uplifted, or new forms of global governance. As the Belarusian leadership a few years ago famously put, with a stronger China, Belarus will become stronger too. So I think that's one way Belarus will make this slogan into reality.
Belarus occupies a very important position between Europe and Eurasia, as you mentioned earlier. How does Belarus fit into China's economic and geopolitical engagement with the region? And looking beyond both countries, what impact could closer China-Belarus ties have on the geopolitical landscape of Eurasia?
On this, it's worth pointing out, ever since early 2000, I think the Chinese leadership has made it very clear Belarus occupies a unique position between Europe and Eurasia. Chinese side often calls Belarus as an important middle point or between Europe and Asia. It's an important hub of transportation and the connectivity between Europe and Asia or across Eurasia. So that's a basic assessment of Belarus' unique and important position in between Europe and Asia. In the near future, both sides are interested in making full use of that important and unique geographic position of Belarus. We've already seen, for example, how the Great Stone Industrial Park in Belarus has become essentially a signature project of the Belt and Road Initiative in Eurasian region. I have to say the new geopolitical reality has raised new challenges for such projects to work out, to realize its full potential, because in the original imagination, Greystone is mostly serving as Chinese investors' entry point into the Eurasia Economic Union and onward all the way to Europe. And with all the conflict, new regional geopolitical reality, that kind of function now somewhat become constrained. So I think next step, Belarus and China need to work together to adjust all these connectivity, transcontinental, trans-Eurasian connectivity projects or initiatives to adapt and adjust these existing projects to make it fit the new geopolitical and economic reality. Greystone is already doing some adaptation along that line. But I think there's room and necessity for both parties involved to speed up this kind of adaptation to the new geopolitical and geoeconomic reality. But regardless of what these adaptation steps are, ultimately, I think active adaptation by Belarus and China, both from government and the business, will overall contribute to the both economic prosperity, but also social and political stability of the Eurasian region. That's for sure.
Thank you very much. That was Zhang Xin, Deputy Director of the Center for Russian Studies and East China Normal University. Coming up, why can the Communist Party of China steer the country's modernization? This is World Today. Stay tuned. As the Communist Party of China celebrates the 105th anniversary of its founding this week, we're bringing you a special series exploring the key factors behind the party's vitality and its role in shaping China's development over the past century. Today, we focus on the CPC's leadership in advancing Chinese modernization. Over the past decades, China has transformed from a largely agrarian society into the world's second-largest economy. At the same time, innovation has become a major engine of growth. China has emerged as a global leader in areas such as renewable energy, electric vehicles, and digital finance, underscoring its transition toward a more innovation-driven and sustainable economy. For more, we're joined by Professor Qu Qiang with the Belt and Road Research Center at Minzu University of China. Thank you so much for joining us, Professor Qu.
Thank you.
First of all, as the CPC marks the 105th founding anniversary, how do you understand the party's original aspiration, and how has it laid a foundation for China's leap toward modernization?
Chinese Communist Party actually was born in 1921. Actually, we have a very long history right now. I think the original aspiration can be concluded as, saving China from extinction and also to revitalize our whole nation and also liberalization of our people. So this is the trinity of our national narrative. This is very important because if you consider 105 years ago, China actually are facing what we call the three mountains, the imperialist and the feudalism and also the bureaucratics and capitalism. So this kind of the three mountains actually are putting on people's shoulder. We have no freedom, we have no wealth, we have no dignity, and people are, just moaning and crying. But now we have already, I think, achieved all these three, aspiration. In current China, of course, we have, the freedom. We have all the independence. We have, the well-off living standard. I think it's probably the best moment in the past 5,000 years of all China's history. So I think this is actually very, very important. Just to consider in another nation with such a large scale of the territory, with such a large scale of the population, I don't think there is a easy answer to achieve this just as three simple but also / difficult standard. Just take a look at, India, just take a look at Bangladesh, just take a look at Indonesia, or, most of these nations, I'm not saying they're not doing right. They're doing right, but they're still facing lots of problem challenges. But China, I think, are handling all these problems in a very dedicated and also very, stable way. So I think that laid a very important foundation for Chinese modernization, because without independence, without the free people, without the basic foundation of industrialization, we cannot have this new era modernization or high quality development ever since 2012. So I think the original aspiration actually give us the precondition of the politics, give us very good institution preparation, and also give us the foundation of the materials, and also prepare the whole society in high morale. So I think without leadership, the CPC, we're going nowhere. So in the past 5,000 years, even though we used to have our heydays, but people actually, they're not enjoying as such a high living standard, high level of the democracy like today, and also high level of the liberty like today. So I think the leadership of the party is, the precondition of everything we have achieved today.
The party's original aspiration was formed over a century ago. How has its meaning evolved as China has entered a new stage of development?
Well, I think, yes, aspiration has always been evolving because there is one true motto for the party is that always seek the truth as how things it is. So we always have to follow the real truth. So 105 years ago, if you're talking about China is going to be the number 2 economy in the whole world, the number 2 military force in the whole world, I don't think everybody's going to buy it. Not even the party itself is going to believe that, because at that moment, the average longevity of Chinese people is only 30 years old. And also our GDP is per capita is very, very low. And many places in China has been semi-colonized by, European imperialist and also Japanese, imperialist. So at that moment, I think the only important matter is that how can we get independent, drive away all these invaders and just be independent and be free of ourselves. And that is the only thing we can dream of. We cannot dream of being very wealthy or have a very large military power. But until we have achieved our full independence by 1949, I think our target has been changed. Because for the first time, the whole nation realized, yes, even though we're poor, even though we're trying to build everything from scratch, but we are being able to fight the toughest enemy of the whole world. We defeated the imperialist Japan. We defeated, the imperialist America at that moment back in the 1950s in Korean Peninsula. And also we defended our dignities against many strong power in the whole world ever since. So at that moment, we are trying to, not only just to be independent, but to stand up high and tall. And after that, we welcome the moment of 1978. We try to understand how the market economy is going to work in the socialist system. So we try to be well off. And also after the 2012, our target has been changed because after 2010, China has already been surpassing Japan to become the number two economy in the sense of the GDP of the whole world. So our new target is how can we be strong enough? So at that moment, we're trying to seek, the high quality development target to build Chinese style modernization in the new era. So it's always been changing, but one mission after another is following a very solid consistency and intuitional, logic, and one target leading to another. But I think the original aspiration never changed. That is the revitalization of the Chinese nation and the happiness of our people.
Professor, every country has its own development path. So what distinguishes Chinese modernization and socialism with Chinese characteristics from other development models?
Well, I think this is always a misunderstanding by many people. People are thinking, yes, as long as you can go along with the history with the whole world, you can have modernization. You can have Wi-Fi, you can have smartphone, you can have, highway. But that is wrong because in the past 200 years, only 47 countries actually can pass the living standard as a middle and a higher income level. And also the name lists are very, very stable. If you're not fighting for it, it will not come to your hand naturally. So it's not just a naturally gained fruit. It's something you need to work very, very hard to gain it. And secondly, especially it's even harder for China because in China, we are facing, challenging conditions. For example, the size of our territory and the size of our population. We have more than 1 billion of population. So how can a country to allow 1.4 billion of population to go across this middle income level to achieve high standard modernization at the same time? I can tell you, in the past 10,000 years, in all history of the human civilization, this phenomenon never existed until China nailed it. So you see, currently the OECD nation, the richest, 40 countries in the whole world, they only have 1 billion of population, and they have crossed this threshold in about 100 years of history. But in China, we have achieved this miracle in about 50 years with 1.4 billion of population. China, a country single-handed alone. If compare China to India, a nation with 1.5 billion population, they're still not there yet. They're trying very hard. I think they have achieved a lot, but still in India, if you go across India, you will find out infrastructures, their rule of law, and also their democracy are still lagging far, far behind of China. And also, China allows so many people to achieve such a high standard of modernization at the same time within such a short time. And also, I think the third unique point is that we followed a very different route. We're not following imperialist. We're not following the colonialist. We're not following those hardcore capitalism. We're using the socialist market economy to achieve so. A market economy leading by, the leadership of the Communist Party. The target is that, the commonwealth and prosperity of all people, no one lagging behind. And to achieve that by not colonizing any neighboring country, not robbing any weaklings. So all that actually has been following a very unique road. This is the only road and, only road possible made by China, not in anywhere else in the whole world. So that we can see the leadership, the CPC is the key to achieve all that 3 points. And more than that, I think the stability in the vision of the strategy and also all this integration power of all the resources, to put all these scattered human resources, natural resources, and also the mind resources into one and fight for the one target. And
Okay, thank you very much. That was Professor Chu Qiang with the Belt and Road Research Center at Minsu University of China. You're listening to World Today. We'll be back after a short break.
name is Alessandro Golombieski Teixeira. I'm a professor of public policy and management at Tsinghua University in Beijing. I am a great listener of The World Today. In my opinion, The World Today is one of the best China radio programs. In The World Today, we can get the best news and analysis in what is happening now in the world. So please come to join us.
You're listening to World Today with me, Do Hongyu, in Beijing. Morgan Stanley has sharply raised its outlook for China's humanoid robotics market, citing the industry's shift from demonstration to commercial deployment. The Wall Street Bank upgraded its forecast for China's humanoid robot shipments for a second time this year, expecting 50,000 units to ship in 2026, nearly double its previous estimate. The bank says commercialization is happening faster than expected, driven by advances in embodied artificial intelligence, strong policy support, and China's vast manufacturing ecosystem. For more on this, my colleague Zhao Yang spoke with Li Luan, Assistant Professor of Economics at Peking University.
Professor Li Luan, thank you very much for joining us. Morgan Stanley has doubled its forecast for China's humanoid robots shipments twice in 6 months. So why is it? What does this tell us about the pace of the development in this industry?
Yeah, I think the most important signal released by Morgan Stanley is that, the whole industry or investors are shifting from, the question of whether the robots can actually perform the task that they're designed to where can we actually deploy these robots. This is a major change because in the past, we have deployed a lot of humanoid robots, mostly in exhibitions, in labs, in public demonstrations. But now I think the focus is more about whether and how fast we can deploy these robots in factories, warehouses, hospitals, and also in other service sectors. I think the forecast revision is also showing that this commercialization is arriving actually faster than a lot of us expected. So I think the pace is also driven by, I think, a lot of forces working together. Right now, we have better embodied AI, we have cheaper components, and we also have more manufacturing capacity, which can support these production at a larger scale. So I think this transition is important because once the robots are deployed in real world environments, they can learn very fast from these deployment data, and every additional unit can actually improve the performance of every subsequent units. So I think the industry is actually entering a new phase. I think it's less about speculative guess of whether these robots can actually be used and deployed, but more about whether and where these robots can actually perform.
Well, take a corporate example. Unitary Robotics rise from a company valued at just 10 million yuan 10 years ago to 42 billion yuan today. So how do you explain that? And do you think it provides high yield investment opportunities for investors?
Yeah, I think Unitary is a very successful story, which can show how quickly that China's innovation ecosystem can scale, especially when we have the engineering talent, we have the supply chains, capital, and also market demand, as well as policy coming together. So robotics is more complicated than large language models because it requires not just the AI system, but also the motors, sensors, batteries, control systems, also the manufacturing facility as well. I think China's advantage is really represented by Unitary because a lot of these capabilities are already clustered in a domestic supply chain. I think it also tells us that these capital markets are beginning to actually price these humanoid robotics as a strategic platform industry, not just as a hardware, because investors are looking for these humanoid robots, not just like similar to what we used to look at a car. A car used to be just a tool for communication, but right now these EVs are actually platforms for TV, for software integration, for AI. So I think this is going to bring a lot of investment opportunities in the future. Of course, right now we don't have that many humanoid robotic companies actually being traded, but I think in the future, Unitary is among the first of China's embodied AI momentum, and I do think investors should pay more attention, especially if they're into these long-term investment opportunities, especially if they're operating a more patient capital.
And as you mentioned, commercial adoption of humanoid robots appears to be accelerating faster than expected. So which sectors are likely to adopt it first? Is that manufacturing, logistics, retail, elderly care, or what else?
Yeah, so I think manufacturing is probably going to be the first and most large-scale environments because factories instead of unlike shopping malls, they're relatively controlled environments. So basically, the tasks are more standardized. Also, there are more metrics to kind of measure how productive these robots are. And finally, there's a strong demand for automation. So I think humanoid robots are going to be very useful, especially where the existing production lines were designed for human bodies. So you can replace these workers very easily with these humanoid robots. And I think logistics, warehousing, they're also very good candidates because tasks such as sorting the packages, moving different boxes, handling the shelves, inspection, loading the docks, loading the goods. They're repetitive works that are easily to quantify and replace. So and these sectors can also benefit from the cost reduction from the automation. And you also mentioned retail and hospitality. And fortunately, we already see some of the adoption for these in this sector, especially if you go to some of the big shopping malls in China. You can sometimes see robots making you a cup of coffee or selling you goods. So I think this is probably going to be less technically demanding than the industrial work, but they also have very high marketing value because the humanoid robot that's selling goods in the showroom can attract a lot of attention. And finally, last but not the least, elderly care and healthcare, they do also have more long-term potential because we're entering into a aging society. The demand is real, but right now I think the settings still require high safety, trust, and also sensitivity. So I think this is an area where after the mature adoption of robots in, for example, manufacturing, we could gradually shift towards that area. But that should not be the kind of the first priority for our adoption.
Mm-hmm. And China has identified robotics and embodied AI as strategic priority. So why is the combination of AI and robotics attracting so much attention from policymakers and investors? And what advantages does China have in translating AI breakthroughs into physical products and commercial applications?
Yeah, so I think the key importance of the combination of AI and robotics is that it turns the intelligence, the artificial intelligence, into the real world or physical capacity. Because, for example, large language models are really popular. They're everywhere. They can reason, they can recognize patterns and plan, but robots can actually act and also change the status of different goods in the real world. So I think embodied AI for policymakers is especially going to matter because it connects directly to productivity, not just for word processing or logistic, for example, reasoning tasks, but also in terms of manufacturing upgrading, especially for the labor shortages that comes with the aging society, and also to enhance our strategic industrial competition. I think for this reason, humanoid robots are not just different goods or a gadget for a consumer. They're actually they're going to be a crucial part of the infrastructure of our production. I think in terms of China's advantage, we do have a lot of advantage in translating the AI breakthrough into physical world. I think our manufacturing depth is our first advantage because robotics, they require a very dense and very specialized industrial base, whether when it comes to electronics, batteries, motors, and so on. I think the second advantage is our market scale. We have large factories, but we also have a large market as well. And the third advantage, I think, is in terms of cost reduction, because we have seen repetitively, because of the competition of our very mature supply chain, we can help companies move from a very costly prototype to a more affordable commercial product faster than many other countries. And finally, I think the fourth advantage is in terms of policy coordination. We already see a lot of policy support from the central government about how to develop the robotics. And this, as we have mentioned previously on your show, this could bring the so-called crowd-in effect for other investors. The other investors can invest along with the Chinese government and expect a high yield.
And Li Lun, so finally, what do you see as the strength of China's innovation environment, and how can those advantages help the country maintain its momentum in emerging industries like AI and robotics?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think China's innovation environment is very strong, and for several reasons. First is the fast iterations, because companies can test these products quickly and also receive the market feedback and adjust their design and also launch their improved version. This is especially important in robotics because a lot of these progress really depends on repeated testing, especially in the real world setting. And another strength is the interaction between our digital platform and also our manufacturing. We have very strong AI models, where we have good cloud platforms and a massive base for manufacturing production. So I think when these capabilities are merging together in the same market, innovation can really move across different sectors, move across software and hardware developers. And finally, I think China also have a very strong application first mindset, because we're not just asking if whether a robot is impressive technically. We're really asking down to earth if it can reduce cost, if it can improve efficiency, it can solve the shortage of labor. So I think this practical orientation or our mindset is especially important for commercialization of these products.
That was Li Luan, Assistant Professor of Economics at Peking University. Coming up, extreme heat wave continues to grip Europe. This is World Today. We'll be back.
Hello, I'm Yin Liang, Kramer Chair Professor of Economics at Willamette University. In a rapidly changing world, staying informed has never been more important. World Today delivers sharp analysis, global perspectives, and the stories behind the headlines. It is your trusted source to understand what's shaping our world. World Today, bringing the world closer.
Welcome back. More than 1,300 people have died across Europe as an extreme heat wave continues to grip the continent. The World Health Organization warns that Europe is the world's fastest warming continent and says governments must do more to protect people from rising temperatures. The heat wave, which began about 10 days ago, has swept across much of Western and Central Europe. Germany and the Czech Republic have recorded temperatures above 41 degrees Celsius. The scorching heat has disrupted transport, strained power supplies, and affected public services. Health officials say older adults are particularly vulnerable. For more, Xu Yawen spoke with Peter Newman, Professor of Sustainability at Curtin University in Perth, Australia.
We have seen record-breaking temperatures across Germany, France, Poland, and other European countries recently, with hundreds of heat-related excessive deaths recorded. So could you walk us through just how severe this early summer heat wave is and what key measures European governments have rolled out to protect the public?
Well, it is severe. This was something I experienced myself in the last few weeks. I was in Europe, and it was very severe because they're not ready for it. They do not expect it to get very hot. Europe is a place that gets cold, and they have to worry about that. When the sun comes out, they love it and they want more. But this was too much. This was extraordinary. So record temperatures of heat are going to happen due to climate change. And that means it's coming to everywhere else. We all are going to experience the increased temperatures. There is going to be severe heat waves in every part of the world. We need to adjust to that.
Experts confirm this extreme heat is closely linked to climate change, and Europe is warming twice as fast as the global average. So beyond temporary weather systems like the heat dome, what are the root causes of Europe's increasingly frequent and intense extreme heat waves in recent years?
Well, yes, there is no doubt a link to climate change, and the reality is we are going past the 1.5 degree point where the world could adjust reasonably to this climate change. We're past that. We're getting into this extreme heat now, and it is going to go not just in Europe, and I don't believe that it is just Europe. that is getting this extreme sense. There are the same kind of things are popping up all around the world. And I do think that we've got to adjust to it. But in Europe, they don't even have proper air conditioning because they just don't get hot enough for it. And that is an extreme issue of cost, because to fit out everywhere with air conditioning is huge. So we can't expect that to be the main solution. We have to stop the climate from changing. That is the major solution. We have to accelerate the processes of getting rid of fossil fuels. Fossil fuels have to be removed from the economy at a faster rate. That is the key issue we face.
Then many experts argue that Europe is still underprepared for extreme heat. We know you're suggesting we need to get rid of the fossil fuel, but it's not something we can do in a day or two. So what are the biggest gaps in Europe's current heat adaptation strategies?
Well, they are getting rid of fossil fuels, but not nearly quickly enough. And the reality is it can be now done quicker. This is the new economy that is emerging, and it turns out to be cheaper than the previous one. So if you move quickly to getting rid of fossil fuels, it is not going to harm the economy. The only thing it's going to harm are those incumbent businesses that depend on fossil fuels and don't want to change. So we have to get to the point of saying that is no longer an excuse. We must go quickly, and it is not going to make it too hard on the economy. The economy will benefit if we get rid of these fossil fuels that we're using. The options have been shown by China, who have been the biggest producer of the alternatives and are gaining in their economy more than any other because they are producing cheaper solar and batteries and electric vehicles of all kinds that can replace the vast majority of fossil fuels. That is the big hopeful thing that we now have got to face up to, and every country in the world has to stop saying, oh, it's too hard to change. We must change. Otherwise, thousands and millions more will die from heat. It is going to be causing hugely more deaths.
Well, as you said, actually the WHO, the World Health Organization, calls heat stress a silent killer, with Europe accounting for about 36% of all global heat-related deaths. So what are the most critical and overlooked health risks that this worsening heat wave poses to the public, especially for elderly and vulnerable group?
Yes, well, elderly and vulnerable people are going to need the constant air conditioning opportunities. If you don't have proper air conditioning, you will not be able to deal with the heat, in particular at that level. But it is a universal right in most of the developed world to have air conditioning, but not in the colder parts of the developed world. So it is something that will need to spread. And the best way to do that is to link it to solar, batteries, electric vehicles, so that they are all part of that package of new technologies that are incorporated into every part of the economy. Because it is going to be a long haul to get rid of fossil fuels, but it has to be done quicker. 2050 is too far away for us to get down to net zero, where, as the Paris Agreement said, we have to do it quicker than that. And that is the agenda that is now emerging because of these heat waves.
We do notice that climate scientists warn that extreme heat could become the new normal across Europe. Based on the current climate projections, how do you expect heat waves to evolve over the next, say, 10 to 20 years? And what message would you most like policymakers and the public to take away from this summer's unprecedented heat?
Well, we have to, first of all, stop thinking that somehow or other this won't occur for another 20 years. It is likely to occur every year from here on in most parts of the world that have a reasonable degree of sunshine, but very rarely get heat waves. Rare heat waves are disappearing. They're going to be replaced by regular ones. That will be the change we have to adjust to. And we haven't taken that on board in terms of how our economies work. We now must link common heat waves as being the basis for why we need to facilitate solar and batteries and electric vehicles and everything to do with climate change, and to build in air conditioning as to be part of that package so people have a way of escaping from those heat waves. At the moment, they can't. You can't just jump into the nearest river. There's thousands of people are dying from doing that. And it is only going to be done properly with technology. And we've got to do the technology of climate change reduction at the same time. We cannot just expect it to go away in the future. It's not. It's going to get worse.
That was Professor Peter Newman with Curtin University in Perth, Australia. China's pharmaceutical and biotech industry is attracting global attention amid accelerating innovation and growing cross-border partnerships. In an interview with Tianwei, Eric Ce, CEO of Sino Biopharmaceutical, says China has evolved from a fast follower into a hub for first-in-class innovation, supported by its strong R&D capabilities, talent pool, and clinical trial ecosystem. Let's take a listen.
Chinese Premier talk about China is others opportunity 2.0. What's your take?
So definitely I think it's like there's a lot of innovation in China going on right now. I think definitely is like what everyone is looking at is not only at the manufacturing capability of China right now, but particularly in that of development. So I think it's just like the world right now is looking in China to see is like how development is accelerating, right? So I think not only the speed, so time capital, but also on the cost. China across industry is finding different ways to really accelerate the speed and the quality of delivery. So right now we see a lot of players from the globe. They're afraid of missing out on the, let's say, time capital, resource capital, on manufacture or on development in particular, to be a part of it. If not sourcing it by themselves, maybe find a local partner to participate and join. So I definitely think that with this capacity, the coming decade is a decade of partnership, whereas China will continuously to be very open to partner with anyone from the rest of the globe. So I think this is correct for all industries, so also including pharmaceutical.
Pharmaceutical industry, you are a player, very important player. Tell me more about how can China's pharmaceutical industry not only in delivering in services and also speed, but also the first class.
Okay, so in the topic of first in class, I believe a lot of times right now China is already stepping from a following position into bringing in novel discoveries. So right now we see there's already two branches in innovation. Number one is finding new modalities to speed up already discovered target to create a lot of best in class, right? The other one is actually when there's an early foundational discovery already happened in any of the early researches, then China moves super fast trying to find the target or the molecule or the modality to that can cope with the new discoveries. So the translational. So I think all these two parts are advanced a lot already in China. That already some of the targets. For example, one target that we did is CCR8 is the very first one globally, and then we really have to try to see is like what sector of oncology, which cancer type that it might has the most impact into. So I think all of these, China is bringing more and more novelty already to the pharmaceutical level. But what is even more important right now is over 40% of global clinical trials is already happening in China.
Right.
And then this is why for the past couple of years, MNCs have been, number one, sourcing more and more asset from China. Number two, actually to really maybe find a local partner to accelerate their clinical trial, because it's not only shorten their development time, but also lessen their development cost.
Right.
So in this aspect, I think what China can really bring in is in the future, maybe for phase 1, 2, shifting to entire China market, and then for phase 3, then participate global. So this will really fill unmet needs in the medical area, as well as to bring in innovative therapies to patients who need them in a more faster and less costly way.
To what degree, faster when you say?
I do think in terms of time, I would say conservatively at least 30%, maybe up to 50% of the time capital can be cut out. Right now for us, we're looking for global partners. What we can really achieve right now with our approval of IND and our first enrollment of patient into phase 3 trial, on average we can complete it in 24 months. So I think this is already a very breakthrough timing compared to like how fast global trial can be there. This is number one. Number two, I think, is on the cost, right? So in terms of costs, right now, one new drug from the early discovery to NDA, it costs 2.6 billion USD. So this is an unbelievable number, and I believe it will continuously increase in the future. So with this cost, I think in China with a mass population, but not only the population, but with the talents really nurtured through the past decades, with the right practitioner, and also with the public health system that the Chinese government built. I think for all these criteria together, there's China clinical development. I think the status is kind of irreplaceable in the next decade at least. So with all of these plus, I think the costs will also decrease by at least 30% to maybe up to 50% as well.
There has been a lot of talk about whether global companies are in China or in China for the world. Where do you think the wind is blowing right now?
I have to emphasize, China is always part of the globe,
yeah.
Right? So when people talk about China innovation, it's also advance in global innovation. So when MNC said if it's in China or in China for global, I think definitely it's for both. Because MNCs are MNCs, they're aiming for global market, right? Whereas China is a significant market as well. So in both ways, I think developing in China means developing with the globe.
Great thought. On AI, there has been a lot of application of AI in the pharmaceutical industry. How much do you think at this moment it can really speed up the research and the clinical trial process? And to what degree the AI plus practice do you think is really workable?
Most of the speeding up is right now happening in the early discovery bits. Maybe before, let's say the PD-1 took up to dozens of years, right? But right now, like if it's happened all over again, it could speed up like by many years. So it really depends. If like finding the early quickest molecule, it can even happen in half a year, right? If not faster. In already existing modalities or therapies, it can even be even faster on improvements of the structure of a molecule, right? If slower, it might still take up a couple of years, but definitely faster than before. So I think this is already seen and already done. But the speeding up in clinical trials right now, I think it's still one of the challenges that we have to overcome.
That was Eric Tse, CEO of Sino Biopharmaceutical. And that's all the time for this edition of World Today. To listen to this episode again or to catch up on previous episodes, you can download our podcast by searching for World Today. I'm Do Hongyu in Beijing. Thank you so much for listening. Bye for now.